sports specialization versus diversification in youth. So, did you guys know that in Canada, we're ranked amongst the top in the world for dollars spent on youth sports? And in 2018, Wintergreen Research, it's like a Boston area research company, they said that Canadian youth sports, the industry grew from $7.2 billion to $8.7 billion in 1 year. So between 2017 to 2018, it grew by a lot. And on average, Canadians spend about $1,000 per child on youth sports every year. And I think a lot of that is due to hockey, just from the sheer amount of equipment that they need to buy, to travel costs, as well as even just like enrollment fees. Is if you're in the GTHL, your fees for even a single leg club is probably $1,500 to $2,000. So it's quite a bit of money. But the reason for all this, I think if you just look at how much professional sports and professional athletes are making now in 2020, and you can even just like forget about your big name sports like in the NBA, the NFL, NHL, and MLB. But if you guys remember the talk that I had about even esports and pro gamers in a previous discussion, like even they make an average of $300,000 US per year, right? And that's for esports athletes. They're also on franchise leagues, so it's nothing to kind of laugh about. But doesn't that make you as a parent kind of that dream of having a pro athlete son or daughter a little bit sweeter when they have that kind of payoff at the end of the maybe 16 to 18 years of a grind that you have? So my question is whether or not sports specialization or diversification is better in youth when trying to create this elite athlete. So most of my discussion points are from public news articles as well as from peer-reviewed articles that I've kind of looked at. And I'll be obviously putting in my own personal opinions into this discussion as well. So to answer that question of which one is better, specialization or diversification, we have to kind of know the definitions behind both of them. So when we're talking about early sports specification, we're talking about intensive training or competition in organized sports by prepubescent children. So that's children under the age of 12. And when we say more of like organized competition, it's anything more than 8 months in a year. So 8 months in a year for anybody that's under 12 years old is considered and categorized under this early sports specification. And for that one, like most of the focus is on a single sport, and it excludes any other sports as well as any free play. So there's not really much time for them to just kind of play around. There's no, if you're shooting hoops, there's not really, you don't go play some pickup in the park or anywhere. It's just kind of club team stuff. Same with hockey. So diversification is a little bit more general. It's a general training approach that focuses more on developing basic motor skills, common tactical strategies, non-specific physical training, and also the enjoyment of participation. So it's a lot less structured, and generally it involves multiple sports. So you're not kind of hooked and locked into one thing. Your kid is able to dabble around and play around with multiple things to try to find out what they're good at and also try to find out what they enjoy. So there's literature obviously on both sides supporting either or, but recently more cons has kind of come out of the specialization route, more cons than pros, that is. And that's due to just like the nature of specialization. Kids are a little bit too focused and like they're forced into repetitive movements that aren't necessarily meant for them at their current stage of development. And if you're looking at the LTAD, which is the long-term athlete development model, that's something that the US Olympic Committee as well as the Canadian Olympics, they both kind of focus heavily on. So the LTAD, I'll touch more on that in the full-length podcast. But essentially, that's the type of model that more of the general skills look at first. So you're more focused on the diversification to begin a young athlete. And then once they kind of find what they're good at and also what they enjoy, then you can go more into that specialized route and you can start to weed away all the other different things that you've tried. But it seems that most kids who have tried multiple sports and are able to choose the ones that they enjoy, um, there's a bigger correlation to success. And success means a lot of different things to people, but in the studies that I pulled on, success was deemed as someone who could achieve elite level status. So anyone that was any athlete that could get into collegiate level athletics. So if you're talking about the NCAA in the States, if you can make it into any of the divisions, then you are considered an elite athlete. Anything else, if you're just playing kind of, I guess, like rec ball somewhere or rec hockey or whatever the sport is, it does not classify as elite level status. So there was more of a correlation for people who started in diversified sports that got this elite level status actually. So I personally agree with the diversified approach when kids are young, before that age of 12. I think it gives them the best opportunity to try different things, as well as be the best at one sport, but then potentially being also the worst at another sport. And I think that difference of being the best on one team, but then also being the worst on another, maybe completely different sports, gives kids that perspective that I'm not the best at everything, right? And it gives them that level of humility and that level of being humble. And it also gives them that capacity to empathize with their teammates on their same team, maybe on the team that they are the best at. They can see through the lens of someone that isn't the best, right? And they can understand, okay, maybe I can't ask someone who's not like me in this sport to become like me, right? Unless you're like Michael Jordan and you're pulling on everyone to get them up onto your level, as we're seeing in The Last Dance. But that's also because at their level, they're already pros, right? So they're already at that elite level. So you can't ask that of them, right? They're not kids anymore. They're not still trying to learn and grow into their bodies. They're set. They're adults, right? They know what to do. So for me, all throughout my youth, as well as into high school even, in high school, I played one sport every season. So first sport in the season was always volleyball. So you come in September, right away you go into volleyball tryouts. So I got that. And then in the wintertime, so a little bit of an overlap between volleyball was hockey season. So then I played hockey throughout the winter season. And then between winter and kind of fall, winter and spring was ultimate frisbee. So then I did ultimate frisbee. And then in the summertime, so overlapping spring and summer, I did dragon boat. So I pretty much had sports all throughout any season that you can think of. And I think that kind of attributed a lot to do with the tactical stuff. So when you're talking about team sports, it translates very easily when you're talking about point system based games. Dragon Boat was the only one that was the most different because that was a racing based game or sport. But that was actually the sport that I had the most success in. And I think a lot of that was based on the mental aspect. So understanding, okay, you're in this team and you're on this boat together. Literally, you're on the boat together. There's nowhere else to go. And if you have a weaker paddler, right, that's on the team, but you know that they aren't necessarily pulling their own weight, how can you approach it? So do you yell at them? Do you be a little bit nicer to them? Do you try to help them in certain ways? So I think that was one thing that being in all these other different sports and being a leader in all these different types of sports and understanding, okay, there's different ways that people kind of interact and also react to different leadership styles. I think that allowed me to excel a little bit more just because of that diversified experience in different sports. So I kind of want to hear from you guys who are still in the audience. That was my main goal for today's kind of condensed and shortened talk, is just to see kind of what your take is. How did you grow up? Were you more of that specialized one sport and that's it, or were you more diversified? And how has that worked out for you? Do you see any differences between you and, let's say, if you have kids? Like, are you raising your kids a different way? So yeah, I'll open up the floor now. I'm pretty much done with my part, but I'll take any questions as well. But I'd love to hear from what you guys have to say.